Hello, and welcome to Real Talk with Roberta's House. I am Annette Grier, president and co founder of Roberta's House. And I am here with Dr. Rockeymoore Cummings, who is the honorary chair for our upcoming Leadership Awards dinner on Saturday, April 13th. Welcome.
Thank you, Annette. It's always a pleasure to see you.
I'm so glad to have you here also. Before we begin, I just want to give a little intro about you so everyone knows your great accomplishments, if you don't mind. So, Dr. Rockeymoore leads Global Policy Solutions, which is a Washington, D.C. based policy firm that makes policy work for people and their environments. She's a former adjunct professor in the Women in Politics Institute at American University. Maya has also served as the Vice President of Research and Programs at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Senior Resident Scholar at the National Urban League, Chief of Staff to Congressman Charles Rangel, and professional staff on the House Ways and Means Committee, and as a Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Legislative Fellow in the office of Congressman Melvin Watt, among other positions. You are very, very busy and have made quite a bit of a mark in our community, in our state. Thank you so much. Dr. Maya Rockeymoore Cummings is also the wife to the former United States Representative Elijah Cummings.
Yes, Elijah and I were married for 11 and a half years, but knew each other for over 20, and were either dating or married for most of that time. And so, he was a great man.
That's beautiful. And Congressman Cummings goes way back with Roberta's House.
Yeah.
He was also very encouraging and my cheerleader personally for the work that I've been doing with my family in this city for years around bereavement care and trauma-informed care. He was one of the first leaders that I went to for help to build this nonprofit and the work that we're doing here. And he was always available, and he made sure that I had what we needed.
Well, he believed in your vision. He believed in you, and that he believed in Roberta's House, and he believed that this city needed the services that you sought to bring.
Yes, and that's what he believed in something greater. He saw the need that our community had for healing and how much trauma, whether it be death, loss of housing, employment, the economic disparities in our communities. He saw this and witnessed it, and I think he touched also so many lives in trying to help others as well. So he was on the front line in many ways, and we're grateful. We're grateful to him. But what I'd like to also ask you, as honorary chair now for our Elijah Cummings Awards dinner, this is our third year now that we're going into this, and you graciously accepted this role. What does it mean to you?
It is an opportunity for me to honor Elijah's legacy in the context of something that he cared so passionately about. The services that you provide for this city in terms of grief counseling and outreach services and other things that help try to, although it's not going to help, have families, be the way that they used to be prior to the grief event, helping with the healing was so important for Elijah. He was a staunch supporter of Roberta's House. And so I felt when he passed and you asked and you said you wanted to honor him with this, it was so appropriate. And so when I come every year, I am in full remembrance mode and almost in a state of, I don't know what to say. It's almost like, I don't know if it's prayer or reverence. It's just, just memory. I'm thinking about him and certainly his passion for the city and for the work that you do. And so when I come and I'm listening to people share their stories of Elijah and I'm observing who you're honoring, it's just, for me, it just amplifies his legacy in such a beautiful way. And for me, it's all about the memories.
Beautiful. But we're so grateful that you accepted
Yeah.
and allowed us to honor him and keep his legacy alive as well. So can you share his vision that he had for this city and some of the memories that you have? Can you share some of those memories with us?
So, what people don't realize is that Elijah was a child of Baltimore City, meaning that he experienced some of the same things that the young people that he encountered as a congressman experienced. He experienced poverty in the city. He experienced, disenfranchisement in this city. He experienced what it was like to be a young person, a black man in this city, in a segregated Baltimore City. And frankly, he knew that larger society had and when I say larger society, I mean, white society had a hard time integrating because they perceived African Americans as being less than. He internalized that negativity, and he did not want it for his children or the children of the city. And so, to be able to rise to become a congressman representing the city, but to do it in a way where he was able to help integrate, the city's services like the pool and and the Riverside pool that he helped to integrate, and to be amongst the first cohorts of African Americans who successfully went through the University of Maryland Law School. When esteemed people like Thurgood Marshall could not go there because they were black. Elijah was proud. He was a proud Baltimorean, but he also knew that there was a lot of work that needed to be done to overcome that history of segregation and disenfranchisement. And so he viewed it as his personal mission to try to be the best representative he could be on behalf of everybody who felt like they were dispossessed in the city. And oftentimes that meant children. He, of course, as you well know, and I still live in the house that Elijah purchased over 40 years ago. But, it's on the west side in the 21217 zip code, a zip code that has a lot of needs. And so walking in and out of his house every day and just going to the grocery store, just navigating, the everyday, roster of activities that he had, he ran into people who were, had addiction issues, or whom experienced death preventable death as a result of gun violence, or young people who, have experienced trauma. He lived it up close and personal. He never left the city. He lived in the midst of it. And so he knew the needs, and he wanted to make sure that he was doing everything humanly possible to bring the services that people needed in order to try to heal.
Whenever he spoke, he had a story to tell.
Yes.
Whenever. And it was always a powerful, impactful story about changing some young person's life. I know that he also did an annual mission trip for young people to go to Israel, I believe, as well.
So now more than 25 years ago, they created it was originally called the Elijah Cummings Youth Program in Israel. And now it's called the Elijah Cummings Youth Program, ECYP. Just this past year, they had their 25th anniversary.
Wow.
I remember
Elijah. Some young people that went through that.
Yeah.
Who are adults, adults
actually,
now.
what's amazing is that they're adults and they're doing fantastic, amazing things.
That exposure made a big difference to their lives.
Made a huge difference. Not just the exposure to the trip abroad, which for many, and for actually almost most, it was their first trips abroad. And let me just back up and say what it is. It's basically a program for primarily African American youth, where they are, and every year Elijah personally made sure that he was there to meet with the candidates, and he participated in the judging process. I mean, he would go through hoops to make sure, even if he was in Washington, D.C., to make sure that he was reading all of their resumes and their applications, and that he could make it back here to meet with these kids in person, because he wanted to impress upon them how important this opportunity was for them.
Absolutely.
But they get selected, and then they're helped. They're helped with their education. They're provided with tutoring. They're provided with, educational assistance. They prepare for a trip to go abroad to Israel for, a period of time. And they're helped all the way through graduation. And I believe that they have more than a 95% graduation rate for the cohorts that have gone through.
Excellent.
And these young people come out and they do amazing things. One is a CNN anchor.
Wow.
Another, his name is Victor Blackwell. You'll see him probably on Saturday mornings on CNN. There are others who have gone on to become leaders of nonprofits here in the city. They're, rising to do great things. And so
he always advocated for reinvesting.
Absolutely.
Reinvesting back into our young people and how important that was.
Absolutely.
Yes. So now I want to bring about or talk about the Healing Act, the Healing City Act that was put into place or written by Z. Cohen. And what does that mean to you? Roberta's House has been very much involved in the Healing City Act also and the implementation of it. But tell me what you thought about this when it first was established or written.
So I thought it was great. And of course, Elijah, would have been proud to have had his name associated with this. At the time of its passage, I was there when they announced it. There was a high school, there was a marching band. We all marched down to the high school, and
I was there.
It was a big deal, and it was made a big deal, and I was so proud, that they chose to name it after Elijah. But this is why it's important for the city. And that is because, a lot of our city employees, whether they be police officers or, agency representatives or street-level bureaucrats interfacing with, parents or children on a regular basis, didn't have training in terms of the people that they were encountering on the streets, particularly young people, particularly youth, had no idea about developmental issues with regards to, just the aging process in general, but especially with regards to the trauma that our people, not just young people, but adults too in the city are facing, and how it affects the human brain, how it affects, people's perceptions, their interactions on a daily basis. And so when you're out here as a service person, whether you're a police officer or whatever, interfacing with these young people, and you're thinking that, maybe you're getting lip service back and you're going to, show your strength or whatever, you have to understand that you are dealing with a traumatized population. There are young people who have lost mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters by the time they are 10, 11, and 12 in the city. And they are walking around like the walking wounded. And those are Elijah's words. He would always say they're the walking wounded, and we have to help them.
So true.
And so that the Elijah Cummings Healing Act finally educates these people in terms of how to not just understand the phenomena, but also how to better interface with the public as a result of it. That's important.
You mentioned about so many young people, but you're right about adults as well, because many of our city workers are people who live in Baltimore City who also deal with trauma.
Absolutely.
And oftentimes, we're walking, as you said, or walking around with trauma and not even aware that we have experienced trauma multiple times. After doing a series of workshops, although I was talking about the young people in the city, what individuals really recognized who were in the training class was their own personal traumatic experiences, that they too were suffering so much grief and trauma and loss throughout their childhood lives and their adult lives. And so how do the wounded care for the wounded?
We're doing it.
We're doing the best we know how.
We're doing the best we know how with what we have. But the reality is that, many folks have diagnosable PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And, they have to care for children. They have to go out and work jobs where they have to care for members of the public. And they're dealing with their own grief and stress and anxiety. And many of us are actually not taught actually how to not only, people say, okay, well, do you have a therapist? And, I think we're just coming to a point in our community where, we're getting over the stigma of actually seeking therapy.
I agree.
But, as you well know, it costs to actually have a therapist if you don't have services like the Roberta's House available to you. And so, there's a cost component to it that serves as an inhibitor for some. But I want to just take it a step further. And that is that, counseling and grief counseling and therapy is so important. And many people do it basically on an individual and ad hoc basis with their friends. Maybe if they go to church.
Maybe.
But there's another component, not just talk therapy, but also meditation.
Yes.
Using your body, whether that's, yoga or, dance or things
Nutrition,
that breathing, nutrition. People have no idea how
impact
food
plays
a role in their mood, in their behavior,
their stress
management.
Yes.
No idea. Even finances,
Yes.
spending habits, how it affects your stress and your anxiety, all of that. So, all of this is holistic. And we have to understand that there are tools and strategies and tactics that can be used to help.
That we can learn. Yes. And that's what Roberta's House does, I think, so well. When individuals come here for their grief and their loss, that we're helping them in a holistic way. We're doing meditation and mindfulness. We're talking about diet and nutrition.
Breathing exercises.
Deep breathing exercises.
Yes.
We're helping children to express their pain in healthy ways through the arts, or going into the expression room and punching that punching bag, letting out all the anger in a constructive way. And being able to write in their journals and tell their stories, because we all have stories to tell.
We all have stories.
So helping individuals just to move and find this safe space where they can grow and heal through their trauma is so vital and so important. And that's what we have today that we didn't have years ago. Our parents, grandparents did the best way they knew how in getting through their grief, through their traumatic experiences, through their losses, and they internalized a lot of it.
And ended up passing it on generationally in ways that, people just don't understand that, a lot of the trauma we experience is generational trauma. And as a result, grandfather was an alcoholic. The son, internalized that, and then passed it on to, and so with this, not only are we dealing with the issues of what's happened to me last week or, a month ago, but what happened to your mom and to your dad and to your grandparents. We're carrying that as a result of what's been passed down. And so, we're a population that needs a Roberta's House. We need more. We need more of Roberta's houses across the city and the region and the country, frankly.
And the country, when I do have people come from out of state, they're amazed at the work that we do here. And the first thing they say is, boy, we need someplace like this. In our city.
Can I just say this, and I don't want to take over your interview, but I just want to say this, that stress also hurts the body. Anxiety
absolutely.
hurts the body. If we do not actually address these issues by the tactics that you teach here at Roberta's House, this stuff settles in the body in a way that actually ends up harming you physically. Okay. So if we're talking about anxiety and stress turning into inflammation,
high blood pressure,
that becomes high blood pressure, that causes, your arteries and your heart and your kidneys,
tachycardia with the heart beating fast, too fast,
heart disease. You're setting yourself up for cardiovascular disease and all kinds of unfortunate physical ailments. And so, if we don't release this stress and anxiety and trauma, it's going to get to us in ways that actually cause us to live sicker and shorter lives.
Well, it's already doing that. There's a research study that was done by the Baltimore City Health Department that said that 30% of, I'm sorry, let me correct this, that you have a 30% higher mortality rate living in the city than the surrounding counties. So that means you die younger living in the city. And why? There's so much more stress living in urban communities.
She's going to make me want to move.
Well, stress will follow you, though. It will follow you. That's one thing we know for sure, but we're on a different track in our lives today. Everyone is just moving at a much faster rate. We have all of this social media, which plays a role in people's lives and young people's lives as well, that, I think we've kind of lost our priorities in society. And let's move a little bit more into that area, the exposure of death and loss nationally and how it affects us communally. What do you say about that? What do you think about this? I mean, we, just with the Key Bridge, how much we saw that, on the television and social media, and even what's happening nationally around the world with so much death and loss of, in Iraq and some of the other, Israel, all of these other places.
So as you well know, Haiti. When George Floyd happened, I mean, that was like, it was like a more than a decade of Black men dying at the hands of police officers in various places across. With the video, now that everybody has these phones,
these cell phones,
playing on repeat. Every time something happened to somebody, playing on repeat. And it became, somebody called it, I don't know what they call it, death porn or something like that, where they felt like they just could not avert their eyes from the tragedy. And it was traumatizing to the African American community, especially, traumatizing over and over again every time this happened. So much so that you saw comments online about, I refuse to watch any more clips of Black men dying at the hands of the police. Because, people just didn't understand how it was affecting people internally. And then you turn on the news and you see, either if it's a bridge falling here, if it's, kids, and families being bombed there. There is just a world full of hurt out there, and ingesting it through social media and on television it's a trigger. For people who are already traumatized, it's triggering. And for people who are not yet traumatized, it's traumatizing. And so, managing your exposure to these triggers is important.
Very.
And that means that if you have to turn off the television,
turn it off.
Turn it off. If you have to
put your phone down.
Put your phone down. If you have to delete the apps, delete the apps. You do not need TikTok. Excuse me. You might need a TikTok, but you might not need a TikTok. Instagram and Facebook is not mandatory. I think the only thing that may be mandatory is LinkedIn, and you might not be getting the same kind of content there.
As someone who has been actively engaged in community building and social justice efforts, what strategies do you find most effective in fostering meaningful change?
Advocacy, being knowledgeable about public policy, being being creative about your own ideas, taking your experiences from your communities and sharing those stories with policymakers, being consistent and showing up and advocating for what you want, not letting your needs take a back seat, having your priorities straight and being consistent about making sure that policymakers respect those priorities and follow through on them. I think that is a primary strategy that's incredibly important.
And how can young people be more informed?
You got to read.
About yes, you do. I absolutely agree. But they do. How can young people be more informed about what's happening in the world today? I just had this conversation with my daughter, and I'm of a different age, of course. A different generation. And, they are listening to podcasts, which is very informative in some of them.
Yeah.
Listening to what is happening in the world. So that's one way. And of course, TikTok. Yes.
That's
yes.
what I keep hearing, that I get my news from TikTok.
But
just like, how is
too,
it possible that you can get your news from TikTok? Now it is true that you can get, direct feeds to the Middle East from TikTok. You can get direct feeds to anywhere in the world.
It may not be the best.
You're right.
Way to be informed.
But, I've been seeing some of these social media influencers and how they're like breaking down the issues. And sometimes they're incredibly impressive and sometimes they're not. And so you got to be discerning about your sources, but it's hard to be discerning about your sources if you have no comparison point. So I encourage people, even if they feel like they're getting their news from TikTok, that you've got to do a surround sound. That means you have to find multiple sources to basically verify. If you don't have access to, a newspaper, I encourage you to get access to a newspaper. If you don't have, if you can't, you can do a Google search and find free news outlets and verify that they're credible sources. I do think that it's important. Podcasts can be a good source of information and news, but, always seek to verify and get other sources to basically, determine whether the sources that are your original, place where you get your news is actually accurate. And I should also say this, that unfortunately our young people are suffering because we do not have applied civic education in this country. They are not actually prepared in schools to use their voices and to learn how to become their own advocates for the kind of society that they want to live in or the kind of communities that they want to live in. And so,
where does that begin?
Where does it begin? To me, it begins in, I would say, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And it should be age adjusted, throughout high school. And then, even if you're going to college, there needs to be applied civic education in the college setting as well. They're not getting this anywhere. They don't know how to advocate. They don't know about the legislative process. They don't know about how to use their voices in order to create change. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like I'm proud that there is another activity that I actually created.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So in 2021, January 6th happened. I was sitting there watching television, and I was looking at this building that Elijah and I used to go into every day, and I used to work, Elijah and I met on Capitol Hill. Everybody should know that.
Wow.
I worked on Capitol Hill, and that's how we met. But to see it overrun by, MAGA protesters, who were, using violence in order to invade the building and to go in there and to defile and desecrate the building. I was just floored. And as I was watching this, I said to myself, these people have no idea what we have here in this country. They have no idea what that building represents, and they have no idea what democracy means. And so literally by the end of it, I said to myself, and it just came to me, I said, the Elijah Cummings Democracy and Freedom Festival, we have to make it happen. And so within 2 weeks, I contacted Nancy Pelosi. I contacted friends that I know who were, high-profile advocates and people in the political sphere. And I held the first ever Elijah E. Cummings Democracy and Freedom Festival. It was online at the time because we were in the middle of COVID.
COVID, yes.
But the next year, realizing that I could not carry this by myself and grow it to where it needed to be, I turned it over to Johns Hopkins. And now, this last year, they held the 4th annual Elijah E. Cummings Democracy and Freedom Festival. This next year, we're seeking to expand it with their new facility in D.C., hopefully. We want to bring young people into the fold to make sure that they understand how to basically we'll be using this platform to teach them how to use their voices in the process of democracy so that they can appreciate but also be effective advocates for themselves.
That's our future. We have to.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So what time of year does that usually take place?
Every February.
Okay.
And it's been held at the Reginald Lewis Museum for the past 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. So what else is on your list of things to come, or what projects you're working on, or priorities?
I've got a book coming out.
Oh, wonderful.
Now, you're smiling. I'm not, because
It takes work.
This has been, I think it's been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I signed the book contract actually before Elijah died, and it's now almost 5 years later. And
that's just how good it's going to be.
I printed it out. It's over 400 pages. Nobody's going to read a 400-page book. So we're now in the process of trying to pare it back.
Okay.
And so it's called Rageism. Racism, Ageism, and the Quest for Liberation Democracy.
Wow.
And so basically I make some big arguments in this book about what this country is, how it operates, and how it's affected population groups like African Americans negatively, and what we must do in order to overcome where we are. So it's a book about, how we improve on democracy. Democracy 2.0, 3.0, or 4.0, if you will.
Elijah would be proud of you.
Well, I think the reason why it's been so hard to finish is because literally he and my mother were my sounding boards, and they're both gone now. And, he would always be like, okay, don't say it that way, say it this way.
And you probably still heard his voice, didn't you?
In some ways I did. I'd be like, okay, I can hear him now saying, don't say that.
The voice from beyond.
The voice from beyond, literally. And I mean, literally. And I hear his voice every day let me tell you, because we live, I come out, so we have a little garage in the backyard that we built because there wasn't enough street parking, and especially when he became lame. We didn't want to be uncertain about parking out front, so we built a little parking pad in the back. So when I come out of the parking lot, or our parking pad, and I go down towards the end of the street, he would always tell me, slow down, because we don't know who's around this corner, and you don't want to run anybody over.
And you still hear that.
I hear it every day. I hear his voice every day, and I slow down.
Well, Dr. Cummings, you're not the only one that hears those voices of others that have gone beyond, that still remind us of how we need to take care of ourselves and the things that we need to do. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely.
And we have to laugh, don't we?
We have to laugh.
We have to laugh because they still live with us.
I tell people I needed COVID. And the reason why I needed COVID is because I needed the world to shut down so I could grieve. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I know that a lot of people lost their lives during COVID. But, that was a time where I literally didn't have to worry about anything else except my own healing. And I used it, And so, I'm glad to hear that you did too.
It allowed me just to be still for a moment and to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it did for a lot of people.
Right.
You know, even though there was a lot of loss going on, that it forced us to be still
Right.
and to think about life, to think about everything. And put things in priority, you know, in perspective, rather.
In perspective and
Put things in perspective. And so I don't know if a lot of good has come now as I see things happening today. You know, we see a lot more mental health crisis
because of COVID.
because of COVID,
Yeah.
you know, young people especially.
Yeah.
But the good thing, as you said before, more people are reaching out for help. It's okay.
Right.
We don't fight that stigma as much. I know, you know, for the people who come here at Roberta's house, many of their therapists are referring them here. So it's good to know that they are, you know, seeking help and getting help elsewhere.
One thing I do want to say is that I do think that not just Roberta's house, but I think we need school-based and community-based investments in grief
I agree.
approaches. And so, you know, anything that we can do to advocate for that on the federal and state levels, I'm for.
Roberta's House does a lot of work with the schools, doing good grief workshops and growing through loss. And I'm very excited that the state of New Jersey actually passed a law to make grief education a part of the curriculum in their city schools.
That's wonderful.
That is excellent, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we can possibly follow suit
Well, let me know
here
how I can
in
be
Maryland.
helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us today, Dr. Rockeymoore Cummings. We look forward to seeing you on April the 13th at our Elijah Cummings Awards Dinner Gala. It's going to be at Center Club in Baltimore. And we're honoring United States Senator Ben Cardin, and also Dr. Freeman and Mrs. Jacqueline
Oh, awesome.
Grabowski.
Yes.
Yes. They're also anchors in this city
Yes, they are.
and state as well. And our Torchbearer Award is going to be Larry Poncho Brown,
Wonderful.
who has also brought a just so much beauty and art to this city and the country. Roberta's house, our walls are lined with a lot of Poncho's art, which beautifies this center as well. So these are three great individuals that we will be recognizing, or actually four, that we will be recognizing for this award. And thank you for, again, being our honorary chair and continuing the legacy of Congressman Cummings.
I look forward to another excellent event, and thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you again for joining Real Talk with Roberta's House today. We'd like to invite you to the Elijah Cummings Awards dinner scheduled April 13th at the Center Club. We will be honoring Dr. Freeman and Mrs. Jacqueline Grabowski, also honoring United States Senator Ben Cardin, and also Larry Poncho Brown. Thank you for joining us today.